I am Melanie, a wife who has been mocked by her husband for years. That late afternoon, I returned home, my footsteps deliberately heavy. I told Andrew that I had lost my job, my voice quiet, just enough for him to hear. He smirked, then introduced me to his friends with short words, my unemployed wife. His mother, Margaret, sat beside him, adjusted the pearl necklace on her neck, and dropped a line. She has no ability. I sat still, smiling, my fingers sliding across my phone screen under the table, opening the bank account where the number 10 million USD glowed brightly. Before we get into the story, leave a comment below. Where are you listening to this from? Share and guess how you think this story will end. If you were me, what would you do? Tell me. It was an ordinary Tuesday until 3:17 p.m. My boss called me into the office for a quick chat. I knew right away it wasn't a normal conversation. I had worked for 9 years, leading a team, closing contracts worth millions of dollars. But that day, the company told me I would get an early maternity leave, along with a 10 million USD bonus for performance, and a promise of promotion when I returned. But I didn't share this good news. I texted my husband. I'll be resting from today, hinting that I was unemployed. I drove home in silence, thinking Andrew might show some concern, even if he faked it. I remembered the early days of our marriage. Andrew used to be ambitious but clumsy, failing repeatedly in business ventures. I was the one behind him, staying up late to write reports, connecting him with important partners, even using my savings to pay off his debts. He used to look at me with gratitude, calling me his hero. But when he began to succeed, that look turned into annoyance, as if my presence reminded him of the weakness he wanted to forget. I wondered if his mockery was his way of shaking off that old inferiority. From the kitchen window, I watched the last light of the day fade behind bare trees. The house was warm enough, but there was a chill I couldn't place. Maybe from the crack in the back door, or maybe from the way Andrew looked at me when I came in. The living room smelled of herbs and roasted chicken. Not Andrew's cooking, he had called catering. Some friends are coming by, he said as I walked in. Need to catch up. What he meant was show off his success. Andrew poured bourbon for himself as I hung up my coat. Hey everyone, he said with a forced smile. Here's my unemployed wife. He laughed loudly, lifting his glass like he had just told a joke. Some people chuckled awkwardly. Some avoided my eyes. I smiled politely, said good evening. She finally proved me right, Andrew went on, leaning back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself. I always said business was too tough for her. My mother-in-law, Margaret, sat at the end of the table, sipping white wine. She had been here since I got pregnant, supposedly to help, but really to criticize everything I did wrong, and to be another person I had to serve. Yes, Margaret said, swirling her glass. She has no ability. That's fine. She's just better suited for other roles. I didn't ask what other roles. No need. Andrew sneered. His friends started joining in more comfortably. Don't worry, love, he said. I'll take care of the big things from now on. You can, I don't know, join a housewives' club or something. I kept my eyes calm, though each word felt like a sharp stone cutting inside me. While Andrew talked about a deal he was about to close, I quietly checked my phone, opened the banking app. The number was clear, 10 million US dollars. The bonus from major contracts had already been transferred, and no one in the house knew. I looked up. He was still talking, waving his glass to emphasize. His friends nodded along to his voice like they were under a spell. I didn't interrupt, didn't respond, just quietly observed. The polished wooden table, the clinking of glasses and ice, the smell of food I wasn't invited to serve. Andrew's arrogance was familiar, but this time, it didn't crush me. It sharpened me. Margaret got up, excused herself to check on dessert, brushing past me with her proud perfume. Andrew leaned over to Greg, saying my leaving work was liberating. I sipped water, letting my mind drift to the quiet strength of the plan forming. When the plates were cleared and the guests put on their coats to leave, I had already decided. No mention of the account. no hint of the deals I was quietly making. I would let Andrew enjoy the performance he had staged tonight. When the last guest left, Andrew patted my shoulder as if consoling a child. "We'll get through this, love," he said, his voice full of that fake benevolence only someone who sees himself as the victor could carry. I smiled at him. "Of course," I replied. I was waiting for his next move. 2 weeks later, I sat at the kitchen table, the steady sound of the coffee machine breaking the silence. Morning light filtered through the blinds, drawing thin golden lines across the surface. I had been up since dawn, not because of sleeplessness, but because I wanted to etch every detail of this day into memory. I heard the front door open and close. Andrew's footsteps echoed, still carrying that familiar confidence of all these years. Moments later, he appeared, followed by a lawyer, both dressed in sharp suits, as if preparing for a victory lap. "Good morning," Andrew said, sitting across from me with a young lawyer whose smug face looked as if he was about to read a verdict to the defeated. He pushed the divorce papers toward me, his voice deliberate, each word measured. "We've worked this out to ensure fairness," Andrew began, low and calculated. "With our different paths, I need a partner of equal standing." The lawyer cut in, smooth, rehearsed. "This agreement is clear, quick, no drama." Andrew continued. "You'll get a small allowance to start over." "Consider it my generosity," he finished. I glanced down at the papers. Minimal support, no shared assets. No mention of the house that came from my parents, no acknowledgement of the years I carried him through failed ventures, or the nights I stayed awake worrying over bills while he slept, as if I owed him that peace. I didn't argue. I picked up the pen, those meager numbers hitting me like a slap across the face. Andrew folded his arms, a smirk playing on his lips, clearly waiting for me to explode or to beg. But I only tilted my head slightly, pressed my lips together, and nodded. "All right," I said, my voice so calm the room itself seemed to lose sound. I signed slowly, the pen gliding across the paper like a clean cut, letting Andrew believe I had just buried myself. In that moment, the sunlight from the window hit the glass, reflecting my face, serene, unbroken. Only I knew that the small clause in the prenup had already stated the house was solely mine. Their eyes flickered with triumph, mistaking my silence for surrender, my signature for despair. As I signed, I remembered my father's voice on a bleak afternoon. "You don't need to push anyone into the pit. Let them dig it themselves. And when they fall, you just stand still." I slid the signed papers back toward them. The lawyer snatched them quickly, as if he had just won a grand gamble. Andrew leaned back, his smug smile spreading. "You did the right thing," he said, "for both of us." I met his eyes briefly, then turned away, as if his words hurt me more than I wanted to admit. But inside, I was listing every bank account password, every property document, every thread of connection to business accounts he had forgotten I still had access to. I didn't need to fight now. I only needed to make sure everything was in place. "I'll start packing today," I said softly. When they left, the house felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I moved slowly through each room, opening drawers, pulling hangers off racks, folding clothes carefully. But with each piece I placed in a box, I slipped something else inside. Bank statements, contract copies, receipts for purchases he thought I never noticed. The living room filled with neatly stacked cartons, each dress, each book, each framed picture vanishing from the shelves. But in one brown box against the wall, I lined it carefully. Each file I placed inside felt like loading another bullet for the final battle. As the sun sank low, the hallway was crowded with tidy stacks of boxes. Sealing the last one, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. My face was calm, almost serene. Outside the window, autumn had deepened, leaves spinning down one by one, each a reminder that everything has its time to fall. I walked slowly through the kitchen, the study, the bedroom, running my hand along the tables, the walls, pausing for a few seconds to feel their weight. Tomorrow the house would welcome a new woman, but she would not be me. A month before the day Andrew signed the divorce papers, I had sat in my office lit late into the night, in front of the contracts I had chased all year. When the final signature was done, the notification came to my email. Promotion. A $10 bonus. I remember sitting frozen, my hand on the mouse, the cursor blinking on the screen as if asking me, "What will you do next?" I wasn't going to put that money into our joint account. Instead, I opened an old notebook, flipped to a yellowed page where I had once written the bank account number from before marriage. No one, not even Andrew, knew it existed. When I told Walter, the mentor who had guided me for years, he only nodded, sipping his coffee, eyes narrowing as if he saw through everything. Stay quiet. Let them think you have nothing. That's when you'll have it all. A few weeks later, I walked into the cafe where Andrew had asked to meet, a long gray coat hiding the changes in my body from the child growing inside. He didn't come alone. Next to him was Madison, a young woman with a sharp smile, her eyes scanning me as if I were just a nameless passerby. Andrew leaned back, draped his arm around her shoulder, voice dripping with boast. "We're looking at buying a bigger house. The money, we'll manage." Madison laughed, twisting the ring on her finger. "With marital assets, it's only a matter of time." I sat still, set my coffee cup gently on the saucer, the porcelain sound soft but clear. Only I knew those assets had never belonged to them. I looked at Andrew, my eyes calm, then lowered my head as if I had truly lost. But inside my chest, my heart beat steady like a clock. Each second, each minute, I was leading them right into the trap they had dug themselves. The California air was humid and warm before the rain. I left home early in the same long gray coat, parked a block away from the cafe. A sleek place with high glass windows, polished brass, and baristas in spotless aprons like a commercial set. Andrew was already there when I entered. Corner table, posture perfect. Gray suit pressed stiff. Beside him was Madison, the young woman with the sharp smile, once his secret mistress, daughter of a shareholder in his company. They had been discreet enough that I still had no proof. Her eyes swept over me as if I were invisible. I walked slowly through the room. "You came," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "I think it's best we end this like adults." His voice carried that false sincerity I'd heard before meetings, right before he stabbed someone in the back. "This is Madison," he added, pointing at her with a near smug grin. "She's helped me see life differently. An upgrade, you might say." Madison looked at me with that expression I'd seen 100 times in women who thought they had won. She was beautiful, I had to admit. Hair perfect, dress probably more expensive than the car I drove, and a disdainful smile that looked down on me. I nodded. "Nice to meet you," I said evenly. The waiter came, placed a cappuccino in front of me without asking, because this was the cafe Andrew and I once frequented. Ironic, I cupped the mug, letting the chill of the porcelain ground me. "You know," Andrew went on, "once the divorce is finalized, I won't waste time. I feel free, like I can finally move forward without being held back." He watched me for a reaction. I gave him none, just sipped. Madison tilted her head, eyes shining with the delight of taking a jab. "Must be hard, losing your job and your marriage at once, but at least the alimony will keep you fed." I met her mocking gaze, still calm. "I'll manage," I said. They didn't know the bonus was buried deep in legal structures, unreachable even with a subpoena. Money from contracts, not under my current name. While they chattered, luxury trips, candlelit dinners in cities far away, I let my mind drift to numbers, to the future I was preparing for my child. They thought they were pushing me into the mud. I was already on higher ground. Time passed, but occasionally I caught Andrew glancing at me, hoping to see loneliness, anger on my face. My steady silence unsettled him. If I had broken down, he would have felt justified in his choices. but this almost serene stillness wasn't in the script he had written. Then Madison, in her eagerness to flaunt their future, slipped. "When the house is ours, we'll finally have the space we deserve," she said, twisting her ring as if to flaunt it. "He's already handled the finances." I sat still, set my cup down again. The porcelain sounds soft but final. Only I knew that house had never been theirs. I looked at Andrew calm, then lowered my head as if defeated. But inside, my heart beat steady as a clock. Every second, every minute, leading them deeper into their own trap. I stood, after finishing my coffee. "Enjoy your meal," I said lightly. As I walked out, I felt their eyes on my back. He thought I was leaving empty-handed, powerless. In truth, I had secured everything that mattered, long before he slid the divorce papers across the table. The day in court came under the pale blue California spring sky, the air still cool, but sunlight warming the marble buildings. I parked a few blocks away, gave myself time to walk. Each step on the brick sidewalk felt measured, unrushed, as if I were exactly where I needed to be. My lawyer, Laura, was waiting outside the courtroom. "Good morning," she said quietly, her steady tone the kind that had seen every trick before. Across the hall, Andrew stood with his lawyer, suit pressed, half smile as if victory was certain. He glanced at me like an old possession about to be discarded. We were called in. Proceedings began immediately. The judge read through the agreement point by point. I didn't interrupt. I didn't ask for changes. When the judge asked about support, Andrew jumped in. "She's unemployed. I proposed the minimum." All eyes turned to me, expecting desperation, but I only tilted my head, smiled, and said, "I decline support." A murmur rippled through the room. I even declined spousal and child support altogether. I saw Andrew's jaw loosen, his shoulders drop. I looked straight at him, my voice slow, each word etched into the air. "I need nothing from you." When the gavel struck, I knew it was over. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a notification flashing, the trust fund confirming $10 million. I leaned slightly, catching the midday sun pouring through the long courtroom windows, striking the polished floor. I stood, slowly gathered my papers, my hand steady. Andrew stared, lips moving, but no words came. In that moment, I understood. No shouting, no tears, no revenge was needed. Only silence and letting truth speak for itself. "She just wanted out," his lawyer whispered, loud enough for me to hear. Andrew gave a faint chuckle in reply. Laura kept her face neutral, sliding the signed agreement back without a flicker of worry. She knew what Andrew and his lawyer didn't. My life didn't hinge on this settlement. When the final signature was done, the judge nodded, papers shuffled, and it was over. Our marriage ended in the sound of a gavel. We rose, chairs scraping. At the door, Andrew leaned toward me. "Be careful with spending until you find work," he said softly, fake sympathy coating his words. Madison stood beside him, smiling triumphantly like she had at the cafe. I didn't stop walking. Outside the courtroom, Laura touched my shoulder lightly. "You're free now," she said. My phone buzzed again, the trust confirming $10 million. I leaned slightly, looking at the midday sun pouring through the long windows, striking the bright stone floor. I remembered the numbers in that message, almost unreal, the commas and zeros trailing, proof of everything I had built before Andrew decided I was a burden to cut loose. He thought I walked away with nothing. The truth was, I walked away carrying the very dream he had been chasing. I left the old house with only a few suitcases and a box of documents, moving into a small apartment on the 3rd floor, its white-painted walls already faded, windows opening to a narrow alley that stayed damp after autumn rains. The apartment was bare, with only a worn chair and a simple wooden table. No pictures on the walls, no striking furniture. That was exactly what I wanted. So simple that people would assume I was struggling after the divorce. I kept up the image of being broke, wearing old coats, shoes with worn soles, driving a small compact car. All of it was intentional, to make Andrew believe I had fallen to the bottom, so he would remain careless and spend recklessly. I knew his habits well, and I could see the numbers on the joint credit accounts I had guaranteed swelling. Every restaurant bill, every weekend trip, every expensive gift for Madison, each one leaving a trace. One evening, while I was pouring hot tea, my phone buzzed. Lucy, an old friend who worked at the bank, lowered her voice. Andrew is still using the joint credit cards. The balance has already gone over the limit. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathed in, listening to the soft drip of tea into porcelain, like the ticking of a clock, signaling perfect timing. I know, I answered calmly. Thank you for confirming. Her voice was sharp with frustration. Do you even realize how hard it is to keep quiet while everyone thinks you're broke? She was one of the few who knew about the money I had. Let them think I'm poor, I said, steady. That makes the trap perfect. Lucy sighed, as if mourning what was left of our marriage. Every week I heard new things about Andrew and his upgrade. Andrew carried on his lavish life, grinning wide at a rooftop bar, arm around Madison while champagne spilled over glasses. Then came a rented Ferrari in Miami. Next, selfies in front of a luxury campsite. I didn't care. You could be living in a penthouse tomorrow if you wanted, Lucy told me one night. I could, I admitted. But that would ruin the story they're telling themselves, and I want them to believe it a little longer. That belief was useful. It made him careless. Those credit limits were still active, still under my name as guarantor. I had the right to shut them down any time. If he treated borrowed money like his wallet, he had already made himself weak. A few weeks later, I decided it was time to collect. I wasted no time. The next morning, I called Lucy. Her voice was steady as always, but I caught the slight pause, the kind she made when she knew I was about to do something big. By noon, I was in her downtown office, the kind where everything gleamed, glass walls, and the faint smell of leather from the chairs. Lucy shut the door as soon as I stepped in, set a glass of warm water in front of me. "You're sure?" she asked, leaning just enough to study my face. "Yes," I said, sliding into the chair opposite her. "I want confirmation of every joint credit line he touched since the separation, then close them, freeze everything, demand repayment today." Her eyebrows arched. "They'll be shut down immediately." "That's the point." She turned to the computer, fingers flying across the keys. In less than a minute, a list appeared on the screen. There they were, 3 open accounts, all still listing me as guarantor. One balance made my stomach tighten, not from fear, but from the sheer bottomless spending he'd done. "He spends like there's no end," she murmured. "Travel, restaurants, boutique fees, and that's just what I see." "Freeze them all," I told her. "I'll collect every cent." The debt was huge. I locked eyes with her. "I understand," she said, hesitating briefly before continuing. "The total is very large. Payment will be due within 5 business days." "Then I guess someone is about to have a very interesting week," I replied, calm. She nodded, pulling a stack of forms from a cabinet. I signed page after page without hesitation, the pen moving steadily. Each signature was like closing a door he thought would stay open forever. When it was done, Lucy handed me the thick folder of documents. I was already thinking ahead to his new mansion. The very next morning, Andrew called. His voice sharp, panicked. "Why aren't the cards working anymore?" "I need to make a payment now." I held the phone close, hearing the ragged edge in his breathing, then answered slowly. "The accounts have been frozen. All debts are due immediately." There was a long pause. Then his voice cracked, breaking apart. You can't do this." I smiled faintly, though he couldn't see, my voice dropping low. "I can." And I just did. I hung up, set the phone on the table, sat still, watching the morning light spill through the thin curtains, casting pale gold across the bare walls. In that moment, I realized the greatest power isn't in noise, but in a quiet, sharp decision made at the right time. And this time, every path Andrew had was already blocked by the very hands he had emptied into the pit of his greed. I hadn't gone half a block when my phone buzzed again. Andrew's name lit the screen. I didn't answer. 2 seconds later, a message came. Why aren't the cards working? What did you do? I stopped walking, the crowd moving past. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't reply. The fact that he felt it so quickly meant the freeze order was already in full effect. And this was only the beginning. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, the corner of my mouth lifting into the smallest smile. I hadn't even played the next move, and already he was begging for a meeting. I knew he'd want somewhere public. Men like Andrew always did, thinking they could control the conversation, save face. So I chose the old cafe, the same place where months ago he had leaned back in his chair and humiliated me in front of strangers, as if I were nothing. This time, I arrived first. I asked the staff to take me to the same old table, the one where anyone walking in would see me immediately. I set my bag and papers neatly on the chair beside me, folded my arms across the table. A young waitress came by, her warm smile gentle as she asked what I'd like. Just a cup of warm water, I said. A simple request, safe for the child inside me. I thanked her, watching as she moved between tables, refilling coffee, balancing plates. There was a quiet grace in the way she worked, and I thought this was the kind of elegance I valued. 10 minutes later, Andrew arrived. I saw him before he saw me, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. When he walked in, his suit was wrinkled, tie askew, dark shadows carved deep under his eyes. He spotted me, skipped any greeting, went straight to the table. "You need to undo what you just did," he snapped. Voice sharp and clipped, meant to intimidate. I leaned back, let him stand there for a beat before gesturing to the chair across. "Sit down, let's talk like adults." He sat, but his hands were clenched tight on the table. "The credit accounts? You froze them. Do you even realize what you've done? I can't transfer money, I can't make payments." I cut in, soft but steady. "Completely legal. It's what anyone would do when their ex-husband burns money through accounts under her name." His jaw tightened. "You can't do this." "Oh, I did," I said evenly. "The flights to Miami, the designer clothes, the luxury cars, all funding your mistress and your little life upgrade, all on credit in my name." His eyes blinked, caught off guard. "She has nothing to do with this." "Of course she does," I replied, leaning forward just enough to lower my voice. "She's beside you every time you swipe. And before the divorce. Don't insult my intelligence." The waitress returned, set down my warm water with a polite nod. Andrew ordered nothing. When she left, I lifted the cup, took a sip, and let the silence do its work on him. "You wanted divorce," I reminded him. "You wanted to upgrade your life, remember? This is what freedom looks like. I'm no longer your accountant or financial babysitter." His voice dropped, struggling to stay controlled. "If you don't undo this, I'll go public. I'll tell everyone that you spent my money on your mistress, that you cheated during our marriage." I cut in, calm. "Go ahead. Then I'll release everything, every transfer, every receipt, every picture. I'm sure plenty of people will find it fascinating." His face went pale for a second before he looked away. The door opened again, and this time, no one else but Madison walked in. She froze mid-step, eyes widening as she saw Andrew sitting across from me. Her gaze darted quickly from him to me, then stuck, as if trying to guess what conversation she had just interrupted. I looked up, slowly set my cup down, smiled like I had been waiting for this moment all along. "Good morning, Madison," I said, my tone warm but with a sharp blade hidden beneath. "It's been a while." Her cheeks flushed, her steps faltered. Andrew glanced at her, then back at me, clearly disoriented. Madison hovered, awkward, staring at Andrew like she didn't know whether to stay or leave. He looked at me, then back at her, shoved right out of his comfort zone. I let the moment stretch, the weight of the air pressing between us. Then I leaned forward, just enough so both of them had to look directly at me. "I think it's time to be clear," I began, voice low but cutting like a knife. "You thought divorce meant I had nothing, Andrew. You thought I had failed. But you were wrong. $10 million from the bonuses, 5 major contracts I signed, was locked in a trust long before we divorced." Andrew's eyes flew wide, lips moving but no words forming. Madison shifted in her seat, silk dress rustling, her face hardening. "That was never marital property," I continued. "That was mine, nothing to do with you. And the house? The prenup made sure you'd never touch it in a divorce." I paused. Let the truth sink deep. "And the credit accounts? They've been frozen." I instructed the bank to call in the debt immediately. "Every charge, champagne to Ferraris, now belongs to you, not me." Madison gripped Andrew's hand, her red nails digging into his skin. She stared at him, face pale, lips trembling. You never told me this." Andrew turned to me, slammed his hand on the table, but his voice had lost its usual force. "You can't do this," Madison cut in, her voice shaking. "We had plans to buy a house with assets that included half of mine," I interrupted, fixing her with my eyes. "I've seen the papers, Madison. I know everything, and if you want to test it in court, go ahead. But your love story is very entertaining. People will eat it up." Andrew sat there, face ashen, hands trembling on the table. Madison looked between him and me, her eyes flickering between fury and fear. "I'm not here to negotiate," I said. "I'm here to tell you the game is over. The house and half the joint assets are mine. The debt is yours. You have 1 week to pay it back." Madison stiffened, eyes darting away, while Andrew sat frozen. As if every drop of blood had drained out of him, I lifted my cup slowly, took a small sip. The taste was sweet. I set it down again, my voice low and clear. "You wanted freedom, and this is the price. You dug your own grave." I stood, picked up my bag, and left them with a final reminder. "Be sure to move out of the house today, as I already have. Enjoy your day," I said, my voice as light as air. Both of them sat still, neither daring to speak. I tilted my head, my eyes drifting toward the window where the morning light streamed in, catching the thin smoke rising from someone's coffee. As I walked out the door, the sun warm on my shoulders, I could feel their eyes burning into my back, but I never looked back. In that moment, I knew the game was over. And for the first time, I was the one who placed the final period. They had thought I was the loser. Now they knew the truth, and that truth weighed heavier than any insult they had ever thrown at me. I sat in the lawyer's office, afternoon light slipping through the blinds, painting pale golden streaks across the wooden desk. In front of me lay the final stack of papers, the asset division documents, the stark black ink as if meant to sever every last tie to Andrew. I picked up the pen, my hand steady, and signed my name, each stroke slow and deliberate, as though engraving the mark of a chapter closing. Laura, my lawyer, gave a small nod, her eyes quietly confirming. It was done. Nothing bound me to him anymore, not the insults, not the house that had been my silent battlefield. When I left the office, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from the bank lit up, the number $10 million glowing in the trust account. I looked at that figure bright on the screen, and I felt no sense of winning or losing, only a strange calm, as if a door had closed and a new sky had opened. I folded the phone, slipped it back into my pocket, and stepped outside. I wasn't in a rush. Each step felt lighter, as though I was shedding an old shell, leaving behind fragments of years spent being diminished. The following week, I sold the old house, the place that had held suffocating nights, Andrew's mocking words and silence. The realtor called it a gem needing a little love, but to me, it was a cage I had unlocked myself. When the sale papers were signed, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The money flowed into my account, not as a trophy or revenge, but as the foundation of a beginning, a place free of the past. On the day I moved into my new home, I stood on the balcony, watching sunlight pour across freshly painted white walls, the scent of new wood still lingering in the air. No hurried footsteps, no harsh voices, only quiet filling every corner. I opened the window, let the wind rush in, tugging at the thin curtains as though sweeping away every trace of what once was. For the first time in years, I didn't need to hide, didn't need to wield silence like a weapon, because there was no one left to defend myself against. The child inside me seemed to sense it too, a small movement, like a reminder that a new life had already begun. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't victory to flaunt. This was freedom, freedom to be myself, not the image Andrew or anyone else had tried to impose. I stepped into the garden, pressed my hand into the soft earth, sowed a few sunflower seeds, imagining them rising tall by summer, as I had risen from the darkest days. Each small act, preparing the baby's room, buying little things, planting, was an affirmation. I am enough. I have always been enough. And I am building a home not only for myself, but for the child soon to arrive. Some doors can only open when we are brave enough to close the old ones. And today, I had crossed that threshold.